monitoring the gap radar for the past 24 hours, and so far, no sign of incoming attacks. Maybe we've seen the last of them.
I doubt it. The director seemed to think that there were lots more where the loons came from. I'd keep watching if I were you.
Well, all of this monitoring is making me hungry. I'm going down to the kitchen to get a snack. I'll be back in a second.
Quirk,
Yes, Quiver?
there's an apple in the refrigerator with a note underneath it.
I know. Leave your precious apple alone. Is there anything else in there that I'm not allowed to have before I make another world-shattering mistake?
Yeah. I put a tub of chocolate pudding in there this morning, so don't eat that.
A tub of chocolate pudding. Okay.
Oh, and I also put a submarine sandwich in there, so leave that alone too.
Chocolate pudding, submarine sandwich. Got it.
Wait, I also put a half a watermelon in there too, and a wheel of cheese, and a turkey leg. Leave all them alone, please.
Are you kidding me? Are you hosting a fellowship meal or something?
Yes, after work tomorrow night at my house. Do you want to come?
What time?
8:30.
Sure, sounds fun. Okay, I'll be back in a second.
When were you going to tell me about the fellowship meal? You know I love chocolate pudding and turkey legs.
I was going to surprise you, but I figured if I didn't tell Quirk about it, all of that food, it might not be gone by then.
True. Good call.
What's that beeping? Did I forget to turn off the stove?
No quip. That's the gap radar going off, remember? We got another group of incoming attackers. We'd better call the director.
What did he say?
He said keep an eye on it. He'll be right there.
But that's Quirk's job, and he has just left. Oh man, we're going to get in trouble again, aren't we?
I don't think so. He said we'd be back in a second, right?
Yeah, but Quirk's concept of time isn't exactly precise. The last time he said he'd be back in a second, he was gone for 45 minutes.
Well, let's hope that he chose his words more carefully this time.
Gentlemen, what's the status on the incoming attackers?
Well, sir, it looks like there are 4 of them. They're still too far away for a more detailed analysis. Based on what we can tell so far, they call themselves the Time Twisters. Do we have any more intel on them?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, the Time Twisters have been around for a very long time. I'm not sure what they've got up their sleeve this time, but I can tell you that they are here to attack the Bible, what the Bible teaches about the age of the earth.
The age of the earth? Do we even know how old the earth is?
Well, not exactly, Quip, but we do know that according to the Bible, the earth is somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years old.
Want to attack that? Does that even matter?
Actually, it matters more than you would think. And we need to prepare just as much for this attack as we did for the Loon Squad. Where is Quirk, by the way? Wasn't he supposed to be monitoring the gap radar?
Yes, sir, he was, but he left. He said he would be back in a second.
I see. And how long ago was that?
Well, it was certainly more than a second ago, sir. It's been quite a few seconds since he left, actually.
Interesting. Once again, Quirk has accidentally given me a perfect way to explain why the Time Twisters are such a threat to the foundation of the universe.
What do you mean, sir?
Well, we will let our teachers explain this to the students in a more complete way, but essentially, the Time Twisters don't have much more respect for the meaning of words than Quirk seems to have.
I'm confused, sir.
Well, Quip, when Quirk tells you that he will be back in a second, he clearly does not have a healthy respect for how long a second actually is. If he did, he might choose a different word.
That's true, but I don't think Quirk ever actually means that he'll be back in literally a second. I think he's just using the expression to tell us, I'll be back in a short amount of time.
Well, that's very true, Quip. And we all understand that certain words and phrases can mean more than one thing. but the time twisters take this to a dangerous level that threatens to undermine the foundational truths that our faith is built upon, all of which we are about to find out when we meet them in a few moments.
Again, sir, this all sounds pretty scary. Should we be worried?
Yeah, I think I'm a little worried. I've still got 9 pounds of chocolate pudding and a turkey leg I was hoping to eat tomorrow.
No need to worry, gentlemen. You'll get to eat your 9 pounds of pudding, although I'm not sure if you should. If you two will relay this information on the time twisters to the teachers as it comes in, I'll stand by at the Defenders database and make sure that we have all of the help we are going to need to defend against the attack. Meanwhile, the kids can learn more about why the age of the earth is so important in their classes as they prepare to meet our latest group of attackers. The truth is, usual has nothing to fear.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we just fought off the Loon Squad. Now it's time to go fight off the Time Twisters. And let me tell you, I think it's free. Y'all go to and y'all are going to Hannah. All right, so preschool patrol is going to Hannah. Good. So the third law that we're going to talk about is what you call the inflation problem. At the initial moment of the Big Bang, when the universe is said to have violently expanded faster than the speed of light, in part to resolve problems of the Big Bang, yet to date, there is no evidence for inflation. Even if it were true, other problems would emerge, such as what caused the inflation and what caused it to stop. Although inflation is essential to the Big Bang model, accepting it amounts to a blind faith. So the inflation that the Earth is going extremely fast in 1 second, then what happened to second 2? Why did it stop going so fast? All right, number 4, the dark energy problem. So here's what's happened with all of this. Every time they find a mistake, they have to create a new thing to try to cover up that mistake. So they created something called dark matter or dark energy. So they can't explain why the expansion of space seems to be accelerating rather than deaccelerating as expected by the Big Bang model. So according to the Big Bang model, since it was all created, it should be now deaccelerating. Things should be getting slower. But instead, things are getting faster. So they couldn't explain that away, so they had to create something new. They invented the new thing to cover their fudge factor, and this thing was called dark energy. It was an unknown, listen to this definition, unknown, unobservable, and possibly unobserved so far, and possibly unobservable ever, energy in space, an energy that is thought to make up 73% of the universe. Why? Because there was a flaw of 73%. So we're going to invent something that's in that 73% that caused this flaw. So 73% of the universe is made up of dark matter, and that explains why we had a 73% mistake. If you ever handle your checkbook that way, you'll get in big trouble. All right, number 5, the 5th law is the smoothness problem. So the 5th law is that according to evolution, the world, because it's going as it's banging, as it goes out, it's supposed to be completely smooth. all the galaxies, all the stars, everything should just continue out in this direction. Here's the problem. It's actually chunky and clumpy, and apparently that's a scientific term. As you go out, the universe has different heights and different sizes and chunks, and that doesn't work. All right, number 6. Please tell me I didn't die this early. Good. Number 6, the antimatter problem. So I'm going to read you most of this because this is getting into the deep stuff here for me. The first law of thermodynamics, energy can be transferred into matter. But when it happens, there is something that happens. So when energy is transferred into matter, when it changes its form, there's an equal amount of antimatter that comes out. So you have this energy is transferred into this matter, but there's also an antimatter. Well, here's the problem. If the Big Bang transferred all of that energy that it had to have transferred to have created all of the universe, that would mean there would be that big of an amount of antimatter going out also. You know the problem? We don't find any of that antimatter. We just find planets and galaxies and things created, not the opposite. Number 7, the Fermi paradox. Now I'm swimming in deep water. All right, let me read you this because I don't want to say anything wrong. Oh, never mind. This is pretty easy. Okay, I get this one. Number 8 is going to be funner. Okay, number 7 is that if there is this possibility of us being created from evolution, then there has to be something else that was created from evolution. There has to be aliens. It is required by the Big Bang Theory. And so if evolution of the Big Bang Theory is true, then there are aliens, and according to the Fermi paradox, they call it a paradox because one has to be true for the other to be true, but because the other is not true, we got this problem. So according to this paradox, those aliens would have been smart enough but at some point our two societies would have met each other, and we have never met. Which is why, if you notice, and it's kind of fun to think about aliens and all that kind of stuff, but we need to not get caught up in the fun and realize that if they are constantly sending people to Mars and they're constantly exploring because there's water on that planet, so there's the what? What do they always say every time they want to do another one of those missions? Yes, there's the possibility of life. What they're really saying is there's a possibility of finally proving evolution, Big Bang, true. And the Fermi paradox has to have that out there somewhere. That's why we're spending all these billions of American taxpayer dollars, is to prove evolution, Big Bang, true, because we've never seen an alien, and we've got to find one. As long as we don't find one, then Big Bang evolution's not true. Which, I'm going to answer that more in second class in just a second, because we mushed first and second class. All right, law number 8. The anthropic principle. So this just means that nature is fine-tuned in the universe, and mounting evidence just keeps proving that the earth is perfectly designed. In order to bypass the supernatural implication of scientific evidence or design, that there must be a designer, cosmologists are suggesting our universe is one of many. This is what I was going to bring up, and I thought it was in class too, because I don't see the PowerPoint for this one. Can you go ahead and take us to the PowerPoint that has the multiverse in it? So, because there is design, there has to be a designer, but since we don't have a designer, we've got to have a multiverse. Do you know where the multiverse was first created? Comic books. Science, and by that I mean cosmic evolutionary science, how we started our class. Cosmic evolutionary science takes their knowledge from comic books. Because the majority of people are moving further and further away from the Big Bang because it's just unprovable. So instead now we've got the multiverse. And according to the multiverse, there are infinite numbers of universes. And in these infinite number of universes, most of them failed. Most of them were created. It didn't have the right amount of sunlight. It was created and it was too cold. It was created. And there's all these universes, and ours is the one that worked. I'm skipping. This was in class 2, wasn't it? Or where did you get this slide for me? Okay, so we were supposed to cover this a while ago. But this answers that number 8, the anthropic principle. Because according to the anthropic principle, our world is created perfectly. Since our world is created perfectly, there has to be a creator, but they do not agree with a creator, so now we're coming up with the multiverse. Now I'm going to give you the answer to the multiverse. You want to answer that? According to the rule, and this is not a law, and it's not even a scientific principle, because you can never prove the multiverse, but according to this new rule they're trying to make of the multiverse, everything that can happen will happen in some universe. So that's the argument. So in one universe, everything's cold. In another universe, everything's hot. In another, everything that can happen will happen in some universe, and there's so many of these universes, we just have to live on the one that worked. So I'm going to answer that. You ready? If the multiverse is true and everything that can happen will happen in some universe, then there's a universe with a God. Because if everything that can happen will happen, then that has to have happened in at least one universe. Try that argument with the comic book scientist you're talking to next. All right, lesson 2. Lesson 2, we're fighting against the time twisters. And what was pointed out in the puppet show is there is a big difference between saying, I'll be gone for a sec, and everybody understands you're not going to be gone for 1 second, and what the time twisters are trying to do. Because what the time twisters are trying to do is they're trying to undermine the Bible. And so lesson 2 is the age of the earth. How old is the earth and the universe? Anybody got an answer for that? All right, go ahead, Arthur. 7,000 years. Great answer. Evolutionists are going to tell you, but the number is growing every few years. 13.8 billion years ago, the Big Bang happened. The Earth showed up 9 billion years ago. Humans evolved onto the scene, and after 4 billion years, and now for just a few 100 million years, humans have been here. So, old Earth versus young Earth is a very, very, very important argument. I've got several scriptures here. I'm trying to pick one. Let's look at Romans 10:17. Some of y'all may be able to quote that. Romans 10:17. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the Word of Christ, or Word of God, depending on your translation. It does not come from man. Based on the biblical genealogies of Genesis 5, 10, and 11, which indicate there were roughly, and it depends on how rough you want to be with this, I'm a little more exact than even the book is, but roughly somewhere between 2,000 to 4,000 years up till Abraham. I've got a nice little map hanging on my wall that someone gifted me, and it puts it at 2,000 years on the dot. So somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000, I'm going for even the youngest side of that, close to 2,000 years, Abraham to creation. Now, how many years was Abraham to Christ? About 2,000 years. So what are we at right now? How many years have we been since Christ? 2,025 years. Well, since his birth or something. But really close. So add those together and you've got a little over 6,000 years. So the universe, according to The Bible and the earth, according to the Bible, maxes out at 10,000 years, as low as 6,000 years. Contrary to the evolutionary timeline, Moses, inspired by God, states in Genesis 1 that humans were created in how many days? 6 days from the origin of the universe. So you ever wonder how old is humanity? We're 6 days younger than the universe. How old is the universe? 6 days older than humans. It's not millions and billions of years between the two. Moses' account fits perfectly with Paul's statement in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 and following. Let me read a little bit of that. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. And we could keep reading all the way to 32. But in that passage, how do we see God? What can be known about God is plain to them, because He has done what? Because of what He created. And then verse 20 tells us, since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen. Paul, the Holy Spirit, would be wrong if it is thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions and billions of years from the beginning of creation until to humankind, because there would be no one to see it. His invisible attributes are seen since creation. Now, Luke chapter 11, 50 and 51, Jesus said that the shedding of Abel's blood occurred at the foundation of the world. So, when did the world begin? Abel. When did the world begin? Humans. Here's that number I told you a minute ago. According to the Big Bang model, 99.9% of the Earth's existence happened before a human ever arrived. In Mark 10:6, Jesus said, God made humans from the beginning of creation, male and female. So, when did creation happen? Adam and Eve. So, over and over and over through the Bible, there are time markers that mark the beginning of our universe and our world with the beginning of humanity. They are not two separate by 99.6% events. Let's take that 99.6% and look at it for a second. 4.5 billion years ago, the earth was created. 4 billion, 3 billion, 2 billion, 1 billion. Oh, and just 2 million years ago, humans came on the scene. 99.6% into the time period. Or 6 days, man was made. How long ago was the earth created? 6,000 years ago was the earth created. 6,000, 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000, Miami, Oklahoma. All right. Now we're going to get into, and I think this video is only 4 minutes long, so we have time for it. Let's play Was One Day of Creation 1,000 Years?
For many Christians, 2 Peter 3:8 has become their leading commentary on Genesis chapter 1 and the days of creation. 1 day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day, right? Thus the days of creation were 1,000 years long or more. But does 2 Peter 3:8 actually teach what they're saying? Notice, first of all, that Peter doesn't actually say, with God 1 day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. The apostle actually wrote, "Beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day." Peter used a figure of speech known as a simile to compare a day to 1,000 years. It's not that 1 day is precisely equivalent to 1,000 years or vice versa. Rather, within the specific context of 2 Peter 3, one could say that they share a likeness. In 2 Peter 3, the apostle reminded Christians that scoffers would arise in the last days, saying, "Where is the promise of his, Jesus, coming?" In verse 7, Peter declared, "The heavens and the earth are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men." Regardless of what the scoffers alleged about the second coming, Peter wanted the church to know that the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. Sandwiched between these thoughts is the fact that the passing of time does not affect God's promises, specifically the promise of his return. If Jesus promised to return 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, it's as good as if he made the promise 1 or 2 days ago. Indeed, with the Lord, 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. With men, the passing of long periods of time generally affects their keeping of promises, but not with God. Time has no bearing on whether he will do what he said he would do. 1,000 years are like a day. Bible students should also consider the fact that Peter used the term day and the phrase 1,000 years. This in itself is proof that God is able to communicate to man the difference between 1 day and 1,000 years. For similes to make sense, one first must understand the literal difference between what is being compared. If there were no difference, then it would be meaningless to use such a figure of speech. What's more, within Genesis 1, God used the terms days and years. Many rightly have questioned if a day in Genesis is really 1,000 years or some other long period of time, then what were the years mentioned in Genesis 1? Such a definition of days makes a reasonable interpretation of creation impossible. The facts are, God knows the difference between a day and 1,000 years. Peter and Moses understood this difference. Their original audiences comprehended the difference. And any serious student today can do the same. Finally, even if 2 Peter 3:8 could be tied to the length of the creation days, which logically and biblically it can't, but even if it could, adding 6,000 years to the age of the earth would in no way appease evolutionary sympathizers. A person could add 600,000 years or even 600 million years and still not come close to the alleged age of the earth or the universe. According to evolutionary calculations, one would still be 13 plus billion years away from the Big Bang and 4 billion years this side of the formation of Earth. Truly, even an abuse of 2 Peter 3:8 will not help day-age theorists.
And that's kind of what GW was talking about a minute ago. Let's look now at the original text of Genesis with that same question. So, does Genesis, because some people take 1 Peter and put it into Genesis, that the simile, a day is as 1,000 years, figure of speech, and they say, see, there's proof a day doesn't have to be 1,000 years. So does Genesis give some proofs that it is a physical day? So let's start off with the Hebrew word. The Hebrew word for day is the word yom. The word yom can be used in a few different ways. One is a 24-hour day. The second way is a 12-hour period of the sunlight. And some argue that in some cases, yom could be a generic rather than a specific period of time. For example, in my day, we walked everywhere. So, let me tell you what we do know. We know yom can mean 12-hour period. We know it can mean 24-hour period. The third argument is a little tougher to prove from Yom, but some people use it to say day doesn't necessarily mean a day. So let's go with that example. In my day, Arthur could say that. In my day, all right, now let's continue on with that conversation. In my day, during the daylight, during the daytime, it didn't take us 3 days to get to school. It didn't take us 3 days to obey our parents. We can use the word day in English to mean all three also. A time period, thank you. Time period, a 12-hour period, or a 24-hour period. So how do we in that sentence know which one Arthur was talking about? When he says, in my day, was he meaning 24 hours ago? No, he wasn't. That's obvious. And then when he says, it didn't take us 3 days to do something, we know he's talking 24-hour periods. But it's still symbolic. And then he says, we would get it done that day. We're talking about during the sunlight. How do you know that? Well, it's something very, very difficult that I know you've never heard of before called context. The way we understand everything in the Bible is context. When I was learning to be a preacher, we always had this told to us over and over, starting in like 9th grade. Every time I go to preacher training camp, they'd say, there's 3 rules of preaching. Context, context, context. That's about the most important thing when you go to a text of the Bible, is to make sure you understand the context. So don't just assume that angel is always angel. Don't always assume day is day. You've got to look at the context. So let's do that. First of all, and we're going to look at, let's start at verse 5, Genesis 1:5. God called the light day, and He called the darkness night. Okay, from that context, what does the word day mean there? The light is day. So how long is that? 12 hours, right? The dark is night. How long is that? The other 12 hours. Let's keep reading. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. What context clues do you have to know what first day means? What? Evening and morning. So evening and morning, we just had night is a 12-hour period. We just had day is a 12-hour period, but the first day was a evening and a morning. And you say, why evening and morning? Well, because we're talking about Hebrews. Jewish people, their day starts at what time? Evening, 6 p.m. And it ends at 6 p.m. the next day. So we start ours at 6 a.m., well, midnight, but we think of it when the sun comes up. They think of it when the sun goes down. So evening and morning was the first day. Now I want you to notice a third thing there, and that is a number. What was the modifying number? First, verse 8. What's the modifying number? Second, verse 13. What's the modifying number? Okay, perfect. Third, all right, Moses helped his audience by saying morning and evening. He helped his audience by numbering them. There is a Hebrew scholar named Justin Rogers who said, while it's true that the Hebrew term day can be used in a non-literal sense in other contexts. So let me pause that and say what he said. There are some contexts that day means like back in my day, that it's not a specific amount of time. But here's what Justin Rogers says about this text. The terms evening and morning are always used in a literal sense. So there is no time, the Hebrew word for day sometimes is not literal. The Hebrew word for evening and morning is always literal. So when he says the first day was evening and was morning, you know it was 6 p.m. and it was 6 a.m. It was 12-hour periods. So, continuing on, are always used in a literal sense. There is, to my knowledge, no place in the Bible in which the terms evening and morning are ever broad. They are always specific. They are always literal. So that's a Hebrew scholar on those two terms. Ironically, Moses could have used a different word, door. The word door means a long time period, such as an age or a generation. But in this text, he does not. He uses the word yom, and then he adds a number, yom 1, yom 2, yom 3, and then he adds a clarifier, evening and morning, yom 1. So he makes it, in the context, very specific. It was evening, it was morning, day 1.
But we have to define the same thing in our language, just like you were saying.
Yes, sir.
There's got to be a definition of that word for you to get the meaning of that word.
That's right. That's right. Later in his writings, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, Moses clarifies so that we don't get confused. Let's look at that. Do you have it up there? Not, I'm flipping. Yeah. All right. Trust the PowerPoint, not the Bible. Y'all turn in there and make sure the PowerPoint's right. Now, Exodus 20, verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. What's the context of Exodus 20? Y'all remember? 10 Commandments. And he tells the Jews, what are they supposed to do on the 7th day? Rest. If a day is as 1,000 years is what Genesis 1 is talking about, then they have to rest for 1,000 years. That'd be a good life, wouldn't it? Probably would get boring, actually. But day is defined as an evening and a morning. It's defined as a day 1, a day 2, a day 3, and it's clarified in the 10 Commandments. Now, the 7-day week concept is found in whose calendars? Who has a 7-day week calendar? Do we have one of those? Yeah, we do. We have one of those. So the Christians have a 7-day week calendar. The Jews had a 7-day week calendar. There's day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and the Jews on the 7th day rested. Christians have first day worship, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. I'll tell you, in Mongolia, it was very confusing trying to explain to them, but they still had a 7-day calendar. They just had it very confusing because the Russians had renamed it. They'd made it Nick Day, Hayar Day, Goro Day. What they named it was day 1 was actually Monday. They were naming it according to the days of work. So they said day 1, first day of work, day 2, second day of work, day 3, third day of work, day 4, fourth day of work, day 5, fifth day of work, and then they called Saturday half day. So they went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a half, because Saturday was a half day of work. So they named the days according to the work schedule, but guess what? There were still how many days? 7 days. Did the Jews get it wrong? Did they misunderstand Moses and how he wanted them to keep the Sabbath day literally every week? Did the Jews get it wrong and misunderstand Moses that it literally was 1 day of rest? If they had gotten it wrong, do you know what would have happened to a Jew if they didn't rest on the correct day? They would have been executed according to Exodus 14. And one person was executed in Numbers 15:32-36 for not keeping the Sabbath day holy. So it was very literal to the Jews. The Hebrew language does not allow the old earth, old universe championed by evolutionists. The Bible writers don't allow it, and Jesus himself doesn't allow it. And ironically, as was discussed in our first lesson, actually evolution doesn't allow it because it doesn't match with the science. Now, for the time we have left, we're going to look at how they try to date the earth. Have you heard, what do they talk about when they find a bone or a rock, or what are some of the phrases there? Carbon dating. All right, so we're going to start off with, here's why they tell you you need a old earth. Because we've got canyons, we've got rings with patterns, we've got lakes, we've got coal and oil, we've got all these things that have to have an old earth. And why do they have to have an old earth? Because of carbon dating. Because they got to set the dates on everything. They get to tell you that nothing matches the date except for evolution. So let's talk about that radiometric dating method. According to the second law of thermodynamics, the universe is running down and wearing out. All right, I'm going to give you a picture so that I can try to go a little faster. There are 3 assumptions that they make with carbon dating. And the problem is they're all assumptions. Okay? If I had 3 candles set before you and one was halfway burned and I told you that that candle had burned for 60 years. Wait, what if I didn't tell you how long it had burned? What if you didn't know that? Okay? One's halfway burned, one's 3/4 the way burned, and one's 90% burned. And how long have they been burning? Well, all you know is this one burned longer than this one, right? And this one burned longer than this, but that's what you assume. What if actually that wasn't a correct assumption? What if this one was out in a windy day and the wind actually caused the flame to hit the candle more and burn it faster? What if this one was out in a rainy day and the rain put it out and they had to relight it? And then here's the question, we don't know how long the candle was in the first place. What if one candle was 12 foot tall and one candle was 5 foot tall? You see, these are all assumptions. Everything about numbering the age of things is all assumptions because there's no way to prove it. And the longer we put the goalpost out of how far away was the creation of the world, the more they don't have to prove their science because it's unprovable. If you say something's millions of years, no one's going to be sitting here, all right, I'll study it for the next million years and see if this is true. And so when we put the goalpost out so far, you cannot test. And without tests, science can't be proven. So assumption number 1, the daughter element. Okay. So this is the first assumption you're going to have, and it goes something like this. When decay happens, elements change. And so as the element changes, you have the father element, you have the daughter element in a rock. And so you study this rock and you see how many daughters it has and how many fathers it has, and on you can go. And what they assume is that at the beginning of time there were no daughters. There was only fathers. So you study this rock and you say, okay, this rock has this many daughters, this few of fathers, so it's taken this much time to get to this state. Here's the problem with that assumption. We assume there was no daughters at the beginning. What if God put the daughters in there from the beginning? What if there were already daughters in it? So then you can't prove it. Okay, let's go to the second assumption. Elements have not been affected by outside sources. I'm going to give you what scientists have actually had to prove themselves is things like lava flows, floods, and mudslides and meteorites do affect. And you say, yeah, duh. When I put my candle outside, if it's windy compared to if it's raining, will determine if it burns the same amount of time. But everything about the carbon dating and the dating assumes that in the last 40 kajillion years, everything's been the exact way it is today. And it has to keep being that way because say there was a flood, this rock would have changed by the flood, but we don't know there was a flood, so we're assuming there was never a flood. Say there was lava. This rock is affected by the lava, but we don't know if there is lava, so we're going to assume that this rock has been in the exact same state it is in today throughout eternity. And so the second assumption is that nothing affected it from an outside source. The third assumption, the rate of decay has always been the same. Here's the problem with this. Let me read you a little quote. There is a group named RATE, R-A, capital R, capital A, capital T, capital E. In 2003, they gave their findings. They had found several I'm not pronouncing this stuff right, zircon crystals dated by expert evolutionists using the uranium-lead evolutionary dating technique and found them to be 1.5 billion years old, assuming a constant decay rate. Here's the problem. They found helium in them. And according to the dating technique suggested, there cannot be helium in anything that was that old. Helium is only in things that are dated 4,000 to 14,000 years old. Which, if we agreed with all these assumptions they're making, that would date the Earth at 4,000 to 14,000 years old. Now, here's the problem, and I could go into 1, 2, 3 assumptions on our side, and all 3 of these assumptions would prove the earth would be 4,000 to 14,000 years old. Here's the problem with using those assumptions. We have to agree that the scientists know what they're talking about. And they don't even know what they're talking about. But let's go into those assumptions. Based on what scientists believe, it actually will prove the earth 4,000 to 14,000 years old, if they're correct. Number 1 is human population statistics. In human population statistics, if the earth continues to grow at the rate it has grown at, and that's why we don't agree with this, because we don't know that the earth always grows at the same rate, including wars, including famines, and we've started the earth out at the time period they start humanity out, the current size of the earth would be 10 to the 2,000th place. Now, you want to know the problem with that? If we pack humans in shoulder to shoulder, small humans like sardines all across the earth, only 10 to the 82nd power plate could even fit in the earth. And so it would actually take us, only 10 to the 82nd could fit in our entire universe. It would take us 10 to the 1,918th place of other universes to hold all the humans that would have been created if the earth was as old as they claim. But if you take the earth and you multiply it according to the dating that they give us, and you go back to the flood, roughly 4,350 years ago, guess how big the earth would be today? 6.7 to 8.1 billion people, and today it is 7.9 billion people. So if their way they date humans of how population growth should happen, and we took it all the way back to the flood, it'd be the same size it is today. Second, using their models, carbon-14 in ancient fossils and materials. Yeah, this one I don't have time for. It's very complicated, and we're down to 1 minute. Third, soft tissue in blood vessels and dinosaur fossils. Brad Harrop talked about this when he was here. In 2005, many fossils now have been found, including dinosaurs, cracked open and studied and found collagen, blood vessels, blood cells, flexible tissue, soft tissue, and yet none of that could happen in something that was more than 60,000, 100,000 years old, and they're claiming these are dinosaurs 66 million years old. And footprints of humans and dinosaurs side by side. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you, the conclusion of all 3 of those is we're not using that for our argument, because we've already showed you that there will be flaws in the scientific arguments on their side. And if we try to use this as our reasoning, there's going to be flaws on our side. We're using the Bible. There's no flaws in it. And it puts us at 6,000 to 10,000 years.
Attention, attention, Q3. The students have finished their training and have gathered in the situation room. Please be prepared to present tonight's situation report. I'm on my way.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
I have to say, Quiver, that was one of the most interesting days I've ever had as an APF. I had no idea that the age of the earth was important to the foundations of the universe.
I agree, Quip. The time twisters were very sneaky in the ways they attacked the truth of the Bible. But I guess we can all be thankful that we have so many defenders who can help us learn and defend the truth.
We sure can. By the way, where in the world is Quirk? He's been gone this entire time. That's got to be the longest second I've ever seen in my life.
Well, it looks like you three have once again. Wait a minute. There are only two of you. Where's Quirk?
We were just discussing that, sir. He still hasn't come back from the kitchen.
You mean to tell me that Quirk has not helped at all in our defense against the time twisters tonight?
I mean, unless you count the snacking as helping, no. Hey, I thought I told you not to eat my chocolate pudding.
You did. And this isn't your chocolate pudding, but after you told me about it, all I could think about was chocolate pudding. So I drove to the nearest grocery store, which unfortunately was about 20 minutes away, and I bought some.
Quirk, you said you'd be back in a second. We really needed your help today defending against the time twisters.
The who?
The time twisters, Quirk. And Quiver is right. You shouldn't have left your post for so long, especially during an attack on the very foundation of the universe. And especially when you indicated that you would be back in such a short amount of time. The words that we use have meaning, Quirk.
You're right, sir, and I'm sorry that I let all of you down. It won't happen again. But who are the time twisters? Sound like I missed something really interesting.
You certainly did, Quirk. And something very dangerous as well. The time twisters are trying to convince everyone, even believers in God, the Bible, and creation, that the earth is billions of years old instead of merely thousands of years old, as the Bible teaches.
Ah, well, maybe I'm missing something, sir, but what difference does it make how old the earth is?
The difference, Quirk, is whether the Bible can be believed and trusted when it tells us something about the earth, including how old it is. For example, when you told Quip and Quiver that you would be back in a second, no one thought that you would be gone for over an hour, did they?
No, sir, probably not.
Well, in a similar way, the Bible uses words God intended for them to have simple and understandable meanings. For example, when the Bible tells us that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, each one of those days have a morning and an evening. There is simply no way that those words can mean millions or billions of years, which is what the time twisters want us to believe.
I see. So the time twisters believe that the earth is billions of years old, but why do they care?
Very good question, Quirk. You see, the theory of evolution to appear to be possible, there would need to be enough time for all those gradual changes to happen, millions or billions of years, in fact. The problem is that the Bible does not allow for much of that time. So the time twisters try to say that the days mentioned in Genesis 1 are actually millions or billions of years long.
I think I understand. Kind of like when I said I would be back in a second and actually stayed gone for over an hour.
That's right. The word second can either mean a literal second or a short amount of time, but it's not a phrase that you would use when you're going to be gone for over an hour. However, the time twisters are misusing God's words much more than you misused yours. The good news for Quip and Quiver is that they don't have to give their situation report today.
Why is that, sir?
Because I just explained everything that we learned today, Quirk.
I see what you did there, sir. To Quiver, that's why he's the boss.
So, with the exception of Quirk's poor work ethic and grossly inaccurate choice of words, to say nothing of his eating habits, I would say that we have successfully defended the foundations of the universe again, gentlemen. You are all to be commended for your help, along with all of our defenders, in defending against the attacks of the Time Twisters. I hope you'll all be able to join us again tomorrow, because I have a feeling there are more attacks on the way.
Okay, kids, y'all did a great job today helping fight against the Loon Squad and the Time Twisters. But tomorrow there's going to be more attacks, and we've got to be here to help fight, okay? Okay! Okay! Are y'all going to come tomorrow and help me fight at 9 o'clock in the morning? Yeah! All right. So, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to give you each of the grade levels. If you bring a friend, I'm going to give you a prize. Do you think you can bring a friend tomorrow? A brother? Yes. Oh, he's already here today, so you got to bring a new friend. Do you think y'all can bring a friend? We're having a competition to see who can bring the most friends. So let's end with the booster song. Y'all ready? Can you put the booster? I think it's the very first song on the PowerPoint, maybe. Booster, booster, be a booster. Don't be grouchy like a rooster. Booster, booster, be a booster. And boost our Bible school. Booster! Are y'all going to boost it tomorrow and bring friends? Yeah! Thank you for coming.
That's funny. Am I? Oh.